1 year after divorce, Korean Mafia boss finds a baby on his doorstep with a note from his black ex. Seriously, when I first heard how this went down, my heart actually stopped. It's one thing to leave a man who is the most dangerous person in the country, but to come back like this? It is truly shocking. If the sight of a mother giving up her only hope just to save her baby's life moves you, hit that like button. Subscribe right now and let us know your city and the time you're listening, because the secret in that note is about to set the city on fire. Now, to understand the drama, you have to see Sophia Reynolds. She was standing in the shadows of the massive stone pillars of the Jung estate. The rain in Seoul was coming down like it wanted to judge the whole city. It was cold, sharp, and felt like needles against her skin. Her arms were shaking, not just from the cold, but from the weight of the only thing she had left in this world. Exactly 1 year ago, Sophia had signed the papers that ended her marriage to Jung Dae-hyun. She walked away from the man she loved, the Dragon of Seoul, thinking she was finally free. She looked down at the small bundle in her arms. Little Seo-jun was fast asleep. He had his father's nose in her eyes. He was a perfect, tragic blend of two worlds that were never supposed to touch. She thought she could hide him. She thought she could raise him in some quiet corner of the world where the name Jung didn't mean blood. But she was wrong. The shadows always find you. About 12 hours ago, everything fell apart. Sophia was leaving a clinic in Incheon when she saw a black sedan with tinted windows. No matter how many turns she took, they were there. Then the burner phone in her pocket buzzed. It was a voice that sounded like cold gravel. It was the leader of the Iron Lotus, the man who had been hunting her for months. "We know where the boy is, Sophia," he said. "Dae-hyun can't save a ghost, and he certainly can't save a son he doesn't know exists." That was the moment she knew her time was up. She couldn't protect him alone. She stepped out of the tree-line and walked toward those massive oak doors. Every step felt like her heart was being crushed by a heavy weight. She reached the welcome mat and knelt down. She tucked a thick manila envelope into the baby's blanket. It had the DNA test, the records, and her final words. "Grow up strong, my little star," she whispered. Her voice was just a broken mess. "The world thinks your father is a monster, but for you, he will be a god." She reached out and rang the bell. The sound was so loud it felt like it was screaming her name. Then, she did the hardest thing ever. She ran. She hid in the dark woods across the driveway and watched. The door swung open, and the golden light from inside hit the wet stone. There he was, Jung Dae-hyun. He was wearing a white suit that looked perfect. He looked cold and untouchable. But then he looked down. For the first time, the powerful dragon of Seoul froze. His mask broke. He didn't call for guards. He just dropped to his knees in that expensive suit to touch the miracle he never expected. Watching Dae-hyun on his knees was like watching a mountain crumble. This was a man who had never shown a single drop of emotion in public. Yet there he was, reaching out with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. He picked up the bundle so carefully, as if the baby were made of thin glass. Then he saw the manila envelope. I could see the exact second he read that note. Even from my hiding spot in the trees, I felt the temperature in the courtyard drop. His face went from shock to a type of heat that made my blood run cold. He didn't just look angry. He looked like he was ready to watch the world burn. He pulled Seo-jun against his chest, using his own expensive jacket to keep the rain off the baby's face. He looked straight into the darkness where I was hiding. He knew. He always knew when I was near. But before he could speak, the peaceful night was shattered. A second car, a dark SUV with no plates, roared into the driveway. I recognized the symbol on the side immediately. It was the Iron Lotus. They hadn't followed me to kill me. They had followed me to wait for the one moment Jung Dae-hyun was distracted. And they found it. The back windows of the SUV rolled down, and I saw the flash of metal. "Dae-hyun, look out," I screamed, my voice tearing through the sound of the rain. I didn't think about the fact that I was supposed to be a ghost. I didn't think about the divorce. I just ran toward them. The first shot hit the stone pillar beside me, sending chips of rock flying. Dae-hyun didn't panic. He didn't drop the baby. He pivoted his body, tucking Seo-jun into the crook of his left arm and pulling a heavy silver gun from his waistband with his right. He stepped forward, putting himself directly between me and the shooters. He was a living shield. He started firing back with a speed that was terrifying. Every shot he took was steady and calculated. I felt a hot, sharp pain across my shoulder as a bullet grazed me, spinning me around, but I kept moving until I hit the porch. "Get inside the house, Sophia. Now," Dae-hyun roared. His voice wasn't the cold, robotic tone I remembered from our final day together. It was raw. It was the voice of a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. I scrambled past him into the foyer, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The sound of his security team swarming the yard was like a wave of thunder. Bullets were flying, glass was shattering, and the baby started to cry. A sharp, high sound that made Dae-hyun's eyes turn into something not human. He stayed on that porch until the SUV was a smoking wreck at the end of the gate. He didn't care about the danger to himself. When the shooting finally stopped, he walked into the house and kicked the door shut with his boot. The locks clicked into place, one after another, sealing us in. He stood there, his white suit ruined and stained with blood, looking at me with an intensity that made me want to hide and run to him all at once. He walked over to a plush chair and gently laid our son down before turning his full attention to the blood soaking through my sleeve. He didn't say he missed me. He didn't ask where I'd been. He just grabbed my arm, his grip possessive and firm. "You're hurt," he whispered, his eyes scanning my face as if he were memorizing every inch. The dragon was back, and this time, he wasn't letting go. The heavy steel gates of the Jung estate didn't just close. They sealed us into a world where the rest of Seoul no longer existed. Within seconds, the entire property was crawling with men in black suits, their movements silent and efficient. Dae-hyun didn't wait for his medical staff. He carried me into a private study that smelled of old leather and expensive scotch, placing me gently on a velvet sofa. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of a desk lamp. He moved with a focused, quiet intensity that was honestly more intimidating than the gunfire outside. He grabbed a first aid kit, his movements steady as he began to cut away the ruined silk of my sleeve. "Before we go any further, I have to ask, if the way he stepped in front of those bullets for her moved you, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel and tell us your city and the current time where you are listening. Seriously, stay tuned, because what he's about to reveal about those divorce papers is going to change every single thing you thought you knew about this man." The room was so quiet I could hear the rhythmic ticking of a clock on the wall and the frantic thudding of my own heart. Dae-hyun's face was a mask of concentration. He didn't look at my face. He focused entirely on the graze on my shoulder. His fingers were warm against my skin, a sharp contrast to the freezing rain still dripping from my hair. He cleaned the wound with a clinical precision, his touch surprisingly light for a man who made his living through violence. He didn't ask why I came back. He didn't ask about the baby yet. He just worked. "You should have stayed in the car," he said finally. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated in the small space between us. It wasn't a scold, it was an observation. "I couldn't let them hurt you," I whispered. My voice felt thin and fragile. "They were going to kill you, Dae-hyun, and they were going to take Seo-jun." He stopped then. He looked up, his dark eyes locking onto mine with a level of intensity that made me want to look away, but I couldn't. "Nobody takes what is mine, Sophia. Not then, and not now." He reached into the pocket of his ruined white suit and pulled out the manila envelope I had left on the porch. He didn't open it. He just held it, his grip so tight his skin was pulled taut. "I signed those papers," I said, trying to find some ground to stand on. "I left because you told me I was a distraction. I lived in fear for a year because you said you didn't want us." Dae-hyun stood up, moving to a heavy safe behind his desk. He punched in a code and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He walked back and dropped it into my lap. I looked down, my breath catching in my throat. It was the original divorce decree I had signed a year ago, but the section for his signature was blank. It was unsigned, untouched. "I never filed them, Sophia," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low octave. "I let you believe you were free so the Iron Lotus would stop looking for a target. I made myself look like a monster so you would run far enough away to be safe. But I never let you go. You were never my ex. You were always my wife." The room felt like it was spinning. All that time I spent hating him. All those nights I spent crying alone in that small apartment in Incheon. He had been keeping this secret. He had let me live in pain just to keep me alive. It was the most beautiful and most messed up thing anyone had ever done for me. He knelt back down, his hand coming up to trace the line of my jaw. "The sanctuary is back in place now," he murmured. "And this time, the only way out of these gates is over my dead body." Waking up in that massive bed felt like a dream I wasn't supposed to have. The sheets were the same high thread count silk I remembered, smelling faintly of the sandalwood soap Dae-hyun always used. For a split second, I forgot about the black sedan, the gunshots, and the blood on the porch. But then the weight of reality hit me. I sat up, my shoulder throbbing with a dull ache, and looked toward the corner of the room. A hand-carved wooden crib had been moved into the master suite while I was sleeping. Dae-hyun was there. He hadn't changed out of his clothes, though he had removed his jacket. He was sitting in a high-backed chair right next to the crib, his long legs crossed at the ankles. He wasn't sleeping. He was just watching Seo-jun breathe. The morning sun was starting to peek through the heavy curtains, casting a pale light over his sharp features. He looked exhausted, but he also looked like a man who had finally found his missing piece. Seeing this feared mafia boss, a man who could end a life without blinking, sitting in total silence just to guard a sleeping infant was the most controversial thing I had ever seen. "He has your spirit," Dae-hyun said, not taking his eyes off our son. He didn't cry once after the guards took him. He just watched them, like he was waiting for the right moment to strike. "He's a baby, Dae-hyun," I said softly, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. He wasn't looking for a moment to strike. He was probably just terrified. Dae-hyun finally looked at me. There was no coldness in his eyes this time, only a deep, heavy exhaustion that made him look human. "He's a young. He knows when he's in the den of the dragon. He knows he's safe now." I walked over and stood beside him, looking down at Seo-jun's peaceful face. It was hard to reconcile the violence of the night before with the stillness of this room. We had lost a whole year. 365 days of first steps, first words, and quiet mornings that we could never get back. I felt a surge of anger mixed with the relief. "How did they find us?" I asked, the question burning in my throat. I was so careful. I changed my name. I moved 3 times. I didn't even use a bank account. How did the Iron Lotus know exactly where we were yesterday? Dae-hyun's expression shifted instantly. The soft fatherly look vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating mask that sent a shiver down my spine. He stood up, towering over me, his presence filling the room. "That is the question I have been asking my security leads for the last 4 hours, he said. "My men are loyal. Or at least, they are supposed to be. But the Iron Lotus didn't just stumble upon you. They had a digital map of every move you made for the last 3 weeks. He walked toward the balcony, looking out over the sprawling estate. "Someone inside this house told them where you were. Someone I trust has been feeding information to the very people who tried to kill my son on my own doorstep." The realization hit me like a physical blow. The fortress wasn't as safe as it looked. We were trapped inside with a snake, and Dae-hyun knew it. He turned back to me, his eyes hard. "I will find them, Sophia. And when I do, I will ensure they regret the day they were born. Until then, you do not leave this room. You do not talk to anyone but me. Is that understood?" It wasn't a request. It was a command. The silent vigil had turned into a hunt. The atmosphere in the grand dining hall was thick enough to choke a person. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a trial. I sat there, my spine straight, holding Seo-jun. Across from us sat the 7 elders of the Jung Syndicate. They didn't see a mother and her child. They saw a problem. They saw a woman who didn't fit their image of a mafia queen. One of them, a man with a face like crumpled paper named Elder Park, didn't even try to hide his disgust. He looked at me, then at the baby, and then finally at Dae-hyun. "You bring this distraction back into our house." After a year of silence, Park's voice was like sand on glass. "The bloodline must be pure, Dae-hyun. An heir should come from a union that strengthens our alliances, not from a failed romance with a foreigner who brings trouble to our gates." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. It was the same old story. 5 years ago, they tried to frame me to get me away from him. Now, even with his son in my arms, they were still trying to delete me. But I didn't look down. I didn't cry. I looked Elder Park right in the eye. I had survived a year on my own in Incheon. I wasn't afraid of an old man in an expensive chair. Dae-hyun was leaning back, his hands resting on the table. He hadn't said a word the entire time the elders were complaining. He just watched them through the steam rising from his tea. But when Elder Park mentioned the word pure, I saw Dae-hyun's jaw tighten. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy. "Is that all?" Dae-hyun asked. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Park scoffed. "It is enough. The boy cannot be the heir. We have other candidates from families who actually belong in our circle." Dae-hyun stood up slowly. He walked over to Elder Park and leaned down, whispering something directly into the man's ear. Whatever he said made the elder's face turn a ghostly shade of white. Dae-hyun then turned to the rest of the room. "Seo-jun is my